Order. We now come to an important debate considering an e-petition relating to eligibility for mortgages, and I call upon Paul Scully to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Hollowbone, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I beg to move that this House has considered e-petition 186565 relating to the eligibility of mortgages. The petition that has attracted 147,307 signatures reads, "Make paying rent enough proof that you are able to meet mortgage repayments." The petitioner, Jamie Jack Pogson, goes on to say, since living on my own, I've paid £70,000 plus in rent on time, yet still struggle to get a mortgage. Unless you're getting handouts, wealthy, or in recipient of inheritance, receipt of inheritance, it's almost impossible. I want paying rent to be on time, to be recognised as evidence that mortgage repayments can be met. The broken housing market, Mr. Chairman, is one of the greatest barriers to social progress in Britain today. Whether buying or renting, housing is increasingly unaffordable, particularly for ordinary working class people who are struggling to get by. Joint ownership of when people are getting mortgages has actually gone up to 74% from 66% 20 years ago because of the need for two incomes and two people. The average age of first-time buyers is also creeping up. Deposits have increased significantly. It's £48,000 across the country on average at the moment, and here in London, and I'm a London MP, it's £94,000 to get a deposit, average deposit. The key to fixing the housing market is clearly to build more homes, which is why the government is committed to delivering 1 million more homes by the end of 2020. However, finding a deposit is still one of the biggest problems people face when looking to buy a new home. The government's Help to Buy schemes have helped over 320,000 people across the UK buy a new home, including over 275,000 first-time buyers. The Equity Loan Scheme provides buyers with an equity loan of up to 20% of the value of a new build property, repayable once the home is sold. And I'm pleased by the recent announcement of a further £10 billion investment in that scheme to help an estimated 135,000 new buyers and ensure the scheme can continue to 2021. Since its launch, over 130,000 properties were bought with the support of the Equity Loan Scheme. The majority of these, 81%, were to first-time buyers. Now, in helping people buy a new home, industry experts have accredited Help to Buy, with also boosting supply and generating benefits for communities, councils and the Exchequer. The London Help to Buy scheme offers an equity loan of up to 40% for Londoners who have a 5% deposit. The Help to Buy ISA will also continue to help people save up their first home by providing with a maximum government bonus of £3,000 on £12,000 of savings, a boost of 25%. However, I know that there's still far too many hard-working young people from all walks of life that are struggling to gain a foot on the property ladder.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I mean, we're faced here with a situation where the banks have to make sure that they give good loans, but people want to take into account their rental payments. Now, the rental payments don't seem to me to be a good guarantee for future performance, but I wonder if he has any suggestions to how they might be taken into account.
I appreciate the important point that the honourable friend is making, and it's something that I will come to later on in my speech. I think that the thing with rents is that clearly does not give you any guarantee for the future, but it gives you a guide, a better guide on actually a sense of creditworthiness in the sense that they've actually spent time paying on a monthly basis, a regular basis. As you heard from the petitioner, having spent £70,000 with little to show for it, other than paying for his bills, whereas obviously the aspiration of home ownership, that same £70,000 can be building up equity. And if he's got a good record in one, it would be hoped that with all the other checks that banks need to do, there would be, he would be good for credit in a mortgage as well. But the government has doubled its housing budget, and it's investing £7.1 billion in the expanded Affordable Homes Programme to deliver 225,000 affordable housing starts by March 2021. In addition, the Housing White Paper sets out bold new plans to fix the broken housing market and build more homes across England. Starter homes, which are targeted at those first-time buyers that we've been talking about, form an important part of the government's action to help over 200,000 people become home owners. A £1.2 billion starter homes land fund will be invested to support the preparation of brownfield sites for starter homes and other affordable home ownership tenures. And I'm delighted that this year we'll see the first starter homes being built on brownfield sites across the country. They'll be built exclusively for first-time buyers between 23 and 40 years old at a discount of at least 20% below market value. Now, alongside this, a new rent-to-buy scheme will help hard-working households to benefit from a discounted rent set flexibly at levels to make it locally affordable so that they can save for a deposit to purchase their home. Now, stamp duty means a tax bill typically of £11,427, it's estimated, for the average first-time buyer here in the capital, according to the Land Registry, which recorded the average price paid by new entrants to the London property market as £428,546. Even a starter flat costing £250,000, £250,000, attracts a stamp duty bill of £2,500. Now, government, in my view, should aim to take most first-time buyers and some downsizers purchasing smaller properties out of the tax entirely, reduce the burden on family homes and fix anomalies like those around shared ownership properties, an increasingly popular way to get on the housing ladder. The evidence is clear. Stamp duty, like all transaction taxes, reduces transactions. And the effects can be pretty stark. For example, ahead of the buy-to-let surcharge in March 2016, mortgages soared by 71% and then dipped 60% the month after. That wasn't just a short-term effect. 6 months later, in December 2016, buy-to-let mortgage lending was down by nearly 40% on the year before, while other mortgage lending was up. Introducing the buy-to-let surcharge clearly reduced transaction levels. The best way to boost them up again is to cutting the stamp duty for homeowners, which should boost transactions and economic growth. However, by focusing on residential homes, such a cut would also boost home ownership. At the same time, an increasingly popular way to help people buy a part of their property, shared ownership, as I was saying earlier, needs stamp duty reform. Currently, the providers of these affordable home ownership properties and their customers often pay twice. Providers on the whole property, and then shared owners paying again when they buy their share. Stamp duties in such cases should only be charged once, making it even more affordable for people to get on the housing ladder. I will.
On that point, I mean, my understanding, and have some involvement in shared ownership, is that the buyer elects when to pay. And that one of the reasons for doing this is that if you buy a share at, say, £250,000, your stamp duty at that point would be lower than if the price was to go up in future and you elected to pay at a later stage. So that if we reform it, we should at least maintain that choice for the customer, because I think it does work quite well.
Paul Scully.
I thank the Honourable friend for the intervention, and I think you're right that choice is very, very important. I still believe in the tax system to have a flatter, simpler tax system would enable these anomalies to actually be ironed out in the system right at the beginning, frankly, rather than each budget having to iron out any anomalies that come out in time. But I do welcome that. Supply, I started off by talking about, is the most important thing in my view. And the government has taken action on this, with last year seeing the highest number of residential planning permissions granted on record and the highest level of net housing additions since the recession. But it's still the case that the average home costs almost 8 times average earnings, making it difficult to get on the housing ladder. The proportion of people living in the private rented sector has doubled since the year 2000, with more than 2 million working households with below average incomes spending a third or more of their disposable income on housing. And that's why I'm encouraged by the vision for housing set out in the White Paper. That starting point must be to build more homes, slowing the rise in housing costs. So it's right that the White Paper sets out measures to plan for the right homes in the right places, to build homes faster and to diversify the housing market. But if we can get enough houses, if we can lower fixed housing costs for home buyers and have short-term help in schemes such as Help to Buy, there's still significant structural issues that many young people in particular will face, and that's the difficulty in getting a mortgage. Tenants can be disadvantaged in getting credit just beyond mortgages. There are millions of people who are excluded from affordable credit because they don't have a credit history. For the financially excluded, this is a catch-22 situation. Without a credit score, applicants are declined by mainstream providers and are considered riskier customers. But the only way to build a credit score is to have a form of credit, such as a mortgage or credit card in the first place. Now, most people on low incomes manage their limited money carefully, and yet can be discriminated against by banks, utility companies, and other retailers. An estimated 2 million people, many of whom are social housing tenants, take out high-cost loans because they can't access more affordable credit. The Financial Inclusion Commission estimated what is often called the poverty premium as £1,300 extra being spent on basic necessities, paying more for gas and electricity to heat their homes, for mobile phones, for white goods and furniture. The Big Issue has an interesting initiative called the Rental Exchange, which will chime with people that have supported this petition. They've worked with Experian, the UK's leading credit reference agency, to prevent low-income people being caught in a vicious circle of no credit score and so no lending. Since 2010, Big Issue Invest and Experian have been working with registered social housing providers to incorporate tenants' rent payment history into their credit file, with no cost to either the housing provider or the tenant. That data is kept in a secure and compliant way. It's not used for marketing purposes, and it's only made available if the tenancy information is relevant and the tenant has agreed to a credit check, or where it's strictly necessary for an organisation to check information about tenancies, such as a case of fraud, for example. And tenants can opt out of this scheme. More than 150 registered housing providers, including housing associations, local authorities, and arm's-length management organisations, ALMOs, they're signed up to the Rental Exchange, representing 1.5 million tenants across the UK. And Experian has tested out the value of adding rent data to tenants' files for each housing provider that comes on board, and they work with the provider to ensure that the rent payment data is accurate before allowing it to go live. Now, their testing has demonstrated some positive results. They show an increase from 39% to 84% in digital identity authentication rates for social tenants when rent data is included in credit files. As well as getting other better deals when shopping, this makes life easier in other areas, such as signing up for a GP surgery or accessing benefits without having paper copies of identification. In more than 70% of cases, tenants with no significant arrears have seen a positive increase in their credit score. As well as tackling financial exclusion amongst people on the lowest income, this approach can have significant benefit for young people who may have a reasonable income but have not had the time to build a reasonable history for lenders to consider. Rental data gives a more weighty credit file on the register, giving lenders more confidence that the applicant is genuine in the first place, and a positive payment history that provides a strong indicator of good financial conduct. Lord Bird, the founder of the Big Issue, has a private members bill in the other place, the Creditworthiness Assessment Bill, that looks at the wider implications of the difficulties of financial exclusion, but I'll limit the rest of my remarks on accessing mortgages as per the wording of the petition. First-time buyers are much more likely to have been living in rented accommodation now than before. 39% 20 years ago, that's now up to 66%. Rent may have been falling in London over the last few months, but with average rent being £1,564 a month in Greater London, the total amount spent on housing is still a huge proportion of the average household income. Therefore, it's hardly a surprise that so many people looked at this suggestion in the petition as being worthy of further consideration. Now, I'm pleased that the Residential Landlords Association are supportive of the petition, although they do express some concerns about the rental exchange system, as smaller landlords have to go through another layer of bureaucracy to be included with their rents being first paid to a credit ladder before being paid then on to the landlord. Now, they express concern that this muddies the water as to who chases the rent arrears and distances the landlords as well further from the tenant in the first place. Now, although these areas can be overcome, the concerns do point to the fact that a seemingly simple move would need to be carefully considered so not as to create any negative unintended consequences. Clearly, the last thing anyone would want to do is to relax lending to the point that the mortgage market review had to be pulled together in the first place. The Financial Services Authority back in 2010 found that because of the expectations of ever-increasing house prices and the ability to pass risk on to others, this led to relaxed lending criteria and increased risk-taking. But there's nothing here in the petition and the suggestion to suggest greater risk-taking. In fact, it's the very opposite. Having a more rounded history of an applicant's financial history, this can lead to more informed decision-making by lenders. But this transparency does work both ways, and so it can have a negative impact on future applications for some. There are many other factors which lenders have to consider, such as long-term income stability. Homeowners have other costs that renters don't have to pay, such as redecoration, insurance, etc. Maintaining a home is not cheap, especially when it comes to the kind of occasional but necessary maintenance that's required, such as roof repairs and these one-off costs. House purchases it's a long-term commitment, and interest rates can rise more erratically than rents. Now, as a committee, the Petitions Committee, we arranged a forum on the Money Saving Expert website, which had 1,400 people looking in on it and a few people commenting. One person expressed concern that letting agents have too much power over tenants as it is, but the majority of people commenting were largely supportive of such an approach, as mentioned in the petition. Some people did wonder why government needed to be involved in the first place, and that's a sentiment I've always had sympathy with. I'm old enough to remember Ronald Reagan's 9 most feared words: I'm from the government and I'm here to help. But we've got the budget coming up. Can I make a belated plea to the Minister that he takes away the feedback from the 147,000 people who've asked for this and consider a move towards a solution in the forthcoming budget? When he rises, would he be able to let us know if he thinks that there is a market-based solution that we can unlock with our world-leading fintech businesses? Petition committee members always say that the debate following on from a petition is not the end of the petition process, but the start of a campaign. Including rent payments on the assessment of mortgages is not without its possible negatives, but I believe it's well worth looking at. A market-based solution, I suspect, will have the flexibility required to make it work, rather than brief legislation that cannot easily change as the market develops. But I hope that the Minister and the Government will consider the petition seriously and do what it can in this area. Mr Hollowbone, I remember the joy of buying my first house, the sense of freedom of achievement. I'm now at the stage that my children, the eldest one, who's older than I was when I first picked up my house keys, are looking at the options open to them with some concern and trepidation. So let's ensure that first-time buyers have every chance of getting on the housing ladder and fulfilling their aspiration that so many of us here have had the good fortune of doing. Let's do what we can in this area as another piece of the jigsaw in supporting a new generation of homeowners. Thank you.
Question is that this House has considered e-petition 186565 relating to eligibility for mortgages. The debate can last until 7:30. We'll hear Paul Scully summing up the debate at the end of the debate. Paul Scully to wind up.
Thank you, Mr Hollowbone. I think it's been a very constructive debate today, and I hope that the petitioner realises that the fact that we've gone through this within about an hour and a half to reach agreement rather than the full 3 hours is no reflection on the importance that we actually put on this petition and put on this issue. I'm sure a lot of people will be detained not just to listen to my friend, the Minister for South Holland and the Deepings in the automated and electric vehicles second reading, but it's actually down to the important statement that the Prime Minister made a little early on that would have detained a few people. But we've had some great contributions from the ground rent issue that the member for Poplar and Limehouse was talking about the nature of agreement that we've had as well, and how we might make the system work, and also the knowledgeable background from the member for South Suffolk, who actually, I think, illustrates the need for a market-based solution to take into account all of those things that he said. When the member for Plymouth and Sutton and Devonport spoke, and he mentioned about the newspaper article, I just did a quick search, and Jamie Jack Pogson was talking about, he's quoted as saying, it was only a little rant when he was saying how surprised he was that the petition was taken up and so successful. It was only a little rant I was having first thing in the morning on the way to work. Well, frankly, I could have written that as my career path to being here in this place now. So it does show, I hope, to anybody that's thinking of starting a petition, how you can change things. You can have a little rant, get out and do something about it. That's the strength of the petition system, which actually these debates are some of the most watched debates in Parliament. We look at Prime Minister's questions, we look at all of these other things. Actually, these are the issues that we are talking about, we are discussing, that people want us to raise. So thank you very much to all my colleagues for a constructive debate, and thank you to the Minister for the positive way he's responded as well. I'm looking forward to, I know that he will be taking away this and considering it for a proper solution in the long term. Thank you.
Question is, this House has considered e-petition 186565 relating to eligibility for mortgages. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order.